And in 1995, I was in a psychiatric institution with major anxiety disorder, panic disorder, PTSD, and depression. So welcome to the conference. I'm so happy you're here.
And so I don't mean to be flip, I really don't, but it's my story and I'm not ashamed, I'm not embarrassed. It's why I'm here with you today.
I am Tammy West, and that is my story. Welcome to Consider Yourself Hugged, a place to find comfort and support as you navigate your mental and emotional well-being. So sit back and relax, unless you're driving, and get ready for this week's hug. Hello, welcome, fellow hug seekers. I hope everything is going great for you. As this episode drops on Wednesday, March 20th, I think, I will be in the air flying home from California, which sounds like a really super fun trip, but my husband's stepfather passed away, and we're going to California for the memorial service. And he was older, like 94, I think, but that still doesn't make it any less sad to lose someone that's important to so many people. So thank you for your thoughts and prayers as actually, by the time you hear this, we'll be heading home. But this has been a really weird morning because I'm standing to record this when normally I don't, because I'm not speaking to an audience. But when I do webinars, I stand. And I thought I had a webinar at 9 o'clock Central Time here. And so I'm all set up. It's 10 till. And then I realized it wasn't till 10 o'clock. So I know you're thinking that is an absolutely pointless story. But I'm just saying it's been a weird morning. So I had to transition from, okay, I'm about to teach webinar mode to, okay, I'm going to record my podcast mode. And on top of that, well, let me back up. Last 2 weeks, when I talked about self-care, one of the words that people tend to use when they take any time for themselves is what? Guilt. I'm pretending like I can hear you out there in cyberspace. Guilt, right? Oh, I feel so guilty if I take, the day, the afternoon, 15 minutes, 1 minute, I feel so guilty. And I think I mentioned either last week or the week before that I'm not sure I've done a podcast episode specifically on guilt ever. I mean, this is episode 160. And I scrolled back and looked and I thought, well, you know what? It doesn't even really matter, because if I don't remember doing it, then either it's been so long ago or I didn't do a very good job in the first place. So then my next thought was, oh, okay, I'm going to show you this. Those, if you're listening, it's an audio series that I recorded in 2009 called Discovering Happiness in a Stressful World. If you know me at all, you know why I do not sell it anymore. I don't even like it, because it has stressful. And in fact, let me read you the description. This is like on the back. Everyone wants to be happy, but how is that possible in today's stressful world, especially for women? Blah. I mean, I would never say that now, because we can call the world stressful. We watch a lot of historical fiction dramas, Romans, Vikings. I mean, people have their head chopped off just for saying something against a leader. So, but I'm not discounting. You all know, my heart. I'm not discounting that you have challenges in your world. Because originally I thought, oh, because this has guilt on it. And I thought, I'm just going to take that and I'm going to do an opening for you. And then I'm going to put that in there. And then I listened to it. And it's crazy how your voice changes over 2009. What has that been, 15 years? And so I listened to myself and I thought, I sound like a baby. So I decided I'm going to so I have the script here from that audio series, and I've updated things. This is what I'll put in the show notes, of course, but I've updated some things. And so this is going to be like a combo of these things. Let's start with this story. When I first started speaking full time, after I'd left teaching, so that was in 2003, and I worked with a seminar company, and I was traveling 2 or 3 weeks a month. Now at home, we had our children ranged from, at that point, probably 10 or 11 to like 17. And I traveled a lot. My husband was home with all the kids. I don't know if you remember, but we blended 8 children together. 1 or 2 of them had already moved out. But let me check this. Okay. I just had a reminder go off and I thought, did I mess up the time zone again? But I didn't. It was just that I have a webinar in an hour. So we had all these kids at home. I'm traveling 2 or 3 weeks a month. And one afternoon, evening in my hotel, I get a call from my youngest, Michael. And I can't really remember. He was probably 12 or 13, maybe at the time. And the teacher said that Michael had cheated on a test. And what happened in my mind? Guilt with a capital Guilt. I was consumed with this guilt. Now, we're going to come back to that story later, but I wanted to open up. I love sharing stories of when I first had some revelations, and that is going to be a story where I had some revelations. In the show notes, you will find a worksheet, an activity sheet that will guide you on just writing down a list of things that cause you guilt. So, stop the recording, download that, do that, or don't if you're driving, or in any case, at least think of something that causes you guilt. I'll just pause for a second. And I bet you can think of more than one, but the common things that I hear are not spending enough time with my family, making mistakes at work, not being perfect, not being involved enough in, if you have children, in my children's school, like what happened with me. It could just be anything. The list could go on and on and on. And in the next, however long we're together, 20 minutes or so, I hope to really set you free from that, because this is something, like, there are certain things in my world that I've shared with you. Like, I still battle anxiety, and I'm so much better than I used to be, but it surfaces, from time to time. But guilt, I really have been able to situate that. Okay, let's just call it situate that. All right, another thing, if you know about me, is my field of study is about discursive psychology, and it's about words and how we use words and what happens when we use words. So we're going to take this word guilt and we are going to define it. So I'm going to read 3 different definitions for you. You probably know I love AI. Here is an AI definition. Guilt is an emotional state characterized by feelings of responsibility or remorse for having committed a wrongdoing or failing to meet a certain standard of behavior, often accompanied by a sense of regret or self-blame. It can arise from actions, thoughts, or omissions perceived as harmful or morally wrong, leading to a desire to make amends or seek forgiveness. Guilt plays a role in moral development, social interactions, and psychological well-being. Okay, let's do one more and combine those and go through a scenario, because I really believe guilt, the word is used incorrectly all the time, and it is a burden. It's a trap for us. All right, dictionary.com defines guilt as the fact of having committed a specified or implied offense or crime. Let's work through this with a scenario. So, and I'm big on this power of visualization. So what I want you to do is visualize yourself sitting in a courtroom, because the part that I'm taking away from all the definitions, and the way that I'm using my own name again, but the way that Tammy defines guilt is responsible for having done something wrong. That's the way it's used in a court of law, right? All right, so visualize yourself. You're sitting in this courtroom chair and you're trying to determine if you have guilt over an issue. Let's say you have a job, or you're on a committee, volunteer, whatever, and you're working with other people, and all of you are working together to come up with this final project. And so you hand over your part of the project to your teammates, and you realize before you hand it over that you made a mistake. But it's like just a small mathematical error. It's not huge. It doesn't have big implications, and it would take you forever to fix it. So it's not a big deal. You hand it over to people, and you hand it to your friend, who actually is the next person, and she finishes it. She turns it into her boss. The boss catches the mistake, blames your friend, and you don't say anything. Now, remember, you're sitting there in the court of law. So follow me down through my line of thinking. So at some point, this guilt is going to get to you, right? And you're going to probably call a friend. And so let's say you call your friend Sue. you pick up the phone and you call your friend Sue and you say something like, Sue, I made a mistake and I didn't say anything. My teammate got blamed. I didn't speak up. And now I kind of, okay, everybody say it with me. What would we say? I kind of feel guilty, right? Let me go back up to this AI definition. The AI definition said an emotional state characterized by feelings of responsibility. Feelings of responsibility. We say it all the time. I feel guilty. I believe, just like the word stress, I believe we need to get rid of the phrase feel guilty. We need to get rid of it. Because if we're saying that guilt means we are responsible for having done something wrong, that's really what guilt is, right? Well, then it's pretty cut and dry. We either, remember, you're in a court of law, you either are guilty or you're not. That's why the AI definition, I kind of push back on a little bit because it talks about being an emotion, a feeling. But guilt is you've done something wrong or you haven't. Now, in this case, I mean, come on, I just made this up, right? But you are guilty. You made the mistake and you didn't speak up, and so you are guilty. But what about the other things on the list? Well, those aren't so cut and dry. We'll come back to those in just a minute. But when I call my friend Sue and I'm saying I kind of feel guilty, so let's say you're doing something like that, what are you looking for Sue to do? Okay, and I hope I don't sound harsh here. I am really trying to set you free from this crippling emotion that's just, it's a myth. It's a facade. It keeps us trapped in this life where we don't do things for ourselves. And that's kind of what I'm relating this to, because we feel guilty. So what are we really looking to do with Sue? We probably want Sue to make us feel better, right? We probably want her somehow to make this feeling going away. Now, it's not that, like, if you do this, it's not that you're trying to shirk your responsibility. It's not that you're really being irresponsible. It's this. Now, I'm not a huge Freud fan, but Freud gave this a name and he calls it the pleasure principle. And so what the pleasure principle is that we don't want to feel emotional pain in our souls, and we'll do whatever it takes to get rid of it. And so now you might think, well, you could apologize to the friend and that would get rid of it. And hopefully that's going to happen. But the risk when you apologize to that friend is that she's going to be angry with you, which is still emotional pain in your soul. But if you talk to your friend Sue and she says, listen, it wasn't a big deal. It was just a small mistake and you didn't mean it. You didn't mean for anything bad to happen. Then you're feeling better. And so taking that phrase, because feeling guilty just doesn't make sense. Remember, you're sitting in a court of law. And so they're either going to find you guilty or they're going to find you not guilty. Now, if you're guilty, we'll come back to that in just a minute, but here's a beautiful thing. Let's say that you're sitting in the court of law and the scenario, let's say it was a different scenario, that it was actually the boss who made the mistake. The boss misinterpreted it, but still the teammate got blamed and there you are, and they're trying to decide if you were guilty and you weren't. So what happens in a court of law if you're not guilty? I'm going to say something that I think is just a beautiful, now visualize this, okay? You're sitting in the chair. They find you not guilty and they set you free. They set you free. I want you to be able to visualize yourself getting up out of that chair, walking out, and you are free. You are innocent, and let it go. But let's say, go back to the guilt. So if you're guilty, what comes next? It's sentencing. And in this case, because you're guilty, then the sentence would be probably to apologize to the teammate, to talk to the boss, and to fix the mistake. But I want you to remember, so in this court of law, there's the finding you guilty, then there's the sentencing, and once you've done the sentence, it's over. So once you apologize, once you make amends, it's over, and we are going to be done. Make sense? Now, I keep saying And we're about to come back to those issues that aren't so cut and dry. But I keep saying you're either guilty or you're not. So don't say feel guilty. But what you can do is replace it with a better word. I feel sad about this. I feel angry about this. I feel sad because I'm guilty. I feel angry because I'm guilty. Whatever it is, but feeling that emotion is different from saying feeling guilty, because all that emotion does is cripple you. Now, let's talk about self-care for a minute. Are you guilty because you take a 15-minute bath? No. Are you guilty because you decided to take a day to go to a retreat without your family? I mean, I'm saying no. We're going to come back. It can be a little bit more complicated than that. But I can't think of many reasons you would be guilty of taking a 15-minute bath unless someone is in your house, like bleeding or dying, or, I mean, obviously I'm going over the top, but I'm trying to set you free here. Right, let's go back to some of those scenarios that probably aren't so cut and dry. Those relationship issues, those time issues, those balance issues, not spending enough time with people, whatever it is in your life. Well, I'm still going to say the same thing. It's guilty or not guilty. But how do you know? If you're thinking about that for a minute, and you might say, well, people will be angry at you and they will tell you maybe. Well, maybe, but that doesn't always mean people's expectations of you don't always mean that you're guilty of doing something wrong. So we can't really rely on that to assess guilt or not guilt. Here's what I believe. The best way, and this is personal to you. Okay, like in the job situation, I think unless there are external factors in our simple little scenario, but no matter who the person was, they would be guilty of having committed a mistake, not owning up to it, and then letting someone else get blamed and not owning up to it, right? I mean, I don't care who you are in your life, but with personal issues like this, it's very dependent on what I think is to know what your values are. Now, there are lots of different values assessments that you can do. I'm going to put one in the show notes. It's one that I had originally, and I've updated it just a little bit because I think it's really good. I think the way I used to teach this a lot when I did seminars on like core values and work-life balance, and for the seminar company is what I mean. I mean, I did it almost every day. So I got to have a lot of feedback. So you have this activity sheet. It has a list of values. Values are things that help guide your life and your action. It could be things like honesty, spirituality, helpfulness, family time. There's a whole list. I don't remember how many I put on there, and it's not exhaustive. So I left some blank lines for you to fill some things in there. And so here's the way that I recommend you do it. Sit down with a list and pick 10, the 10 that really speak to you. And that would be considered your initial assessment. But 10 is really a lot of guiding principles to your life, because some of them are going to get lost in the outer circle shuffle. So 10 is too many. Narrowing it down, I recommend you narrow it down to 5. 5 is not a magical number. You could have 3, 4, 6. But I think 5 is a good number to have a set of core values that guide your life. So how do you do that? So you've got this list of 10. And this is all on the activity sheet. And so you look at each one, just forget the others, just look at one at a time and ask yourself, what do I do in my life that demonstrates that this is a core value to me? Okay, so many things can be value to you, but I'm talking core values, things that if you don't do them, you feel this tug, right? So let's say, as an example, you circled helpfulness. You're like, yes, I want to be helpful. And so then you say, okay, what do I do in my life that shows helpfulness is a core value to me? And you can't think of anything. It could really mean one of two things. Either it is a core value to you, but you're not living to it, or it's really not a core value to you. Maybe it was your parents' core value, or you just think, well, it should be. What kind of a person would I be if I don't value helpfulness? My parents are very, very helpful. So it doesn't mean you don't value helpfulness. It just means that it's not one of the driving core forces in your life. And so if it's not a value to you, just mark it off without guilt, right? If it is, probably the way that you'll know is you when you have those opportunities to serve and help and you never do, and you really want to, you really feel pulled toward that. So that's one way to come down to a list of 5. Another way is by eliminating the overlap. So let's say that you circled integrity and honesty, and those are very similar to each other. And so you can even look them up and read about them if you want to, but you could probably just choose one of those. So this is, I believe, guilt comes when you have these core values that really are important to you, but you're just not living that way. And so let's do an example. Let's say that you circled family time. You said family time is one of your core values. You work 50 hours a week. You bring work home, you think work, eat work, drink work, take work to your family's events. But are you guilty? I'm going to say yes. Not because I say so, not because it's on this series, but because you said it was one of your core values. Do you see how that works? Now, on the flip side, this is more complicated than just, it's not cut and dry. The word guilt is cut and dry, but working through some of these personal issues is not as cut and dry. Let's say that you are a single mother. Family time is a value to you, but you have to work 2 jobs. You're trying to feed your family. You're trying to protect your family. You're providing for their physical needs. And that is absolutely more important than spending time. Now, making a plan for, as long as, I think guilt won't come if you are making a plan to spend quality time with them and also taking care of yourself. Even if, okay, remember, we've talked about this, at that phase in your life, your time is more limited. So balancing work, time with them, and time for yourself is going to take some work, but it's not forever. It's a stage of life. This type of guilt that's associated with values often just comes because we don't really know what our values are. We haven't really spent time with it. So take that time, get that list of core values, look for those discrepancies, evaluate how you're living. And the last thing, right? The first guilt I talked about was really cut and dry, right? You did something wrong. The second was the relational, a little bit gray area issues to work through your core values. And the third type of guilt is when we're pulled in a million different directions. So, scenario for you, years ago, my mother passed in 2016. But at the height of the difficult time with her, I was traveling a lot. It was when I was doing the seminar route, which I will come back to my son's story in a minute. I'm traveling the seminar route. I'm gone a lot. I have these 8 children. At one point, 7 of them were living at home. Depending on who was living at home at any given time, we could have 3, we could have about 4. And so my mother lived with my sister for a period of time. Her health was not great. She chose to live with my sister, even though she could take care of herself at one point. And my sister allowed her to live with her to help her take care of her own children. And I think there was also an element of guilt. So it was a mutual decision, but my mom's health was not good. And I remember this one point, I had been gone the whole week. I got home at, let's say, 11 o'clock. My flight got home at 11 o'clock. I get up on Saturday. I get the phone call. Mom's in the hospital again. Now, as any, quote, good daughter would do, I drop everything in my family. I rush to the hospital, and my husband is saying, okay, you've been gone a week and you're leaving again for the whole day. Because sometimes I have to leave out again on Sunday and be gone for the next week. And so him and the children, he's like, you're leaving us again. So of course I am feeling guilty. At this point in my life, at this point now, currently in 2024, I try not to let issues go on and on in my life before I'm actively seeking a solution. But at this point, I wasn't really equipped. I just wasn't. And that's what I'm trying to help you do. I mean, I wanted to be a good trainer, a good speaker, a good wife, a good mother, a good sister, a good friend. I wanted to do, and this is all related to perfectionism, which is we are going to do that next time. And so we could even say, well, I want to be the perfect friend and mother and worker and wife and all of those things. And it's a tremendous amount of self-imposed guilt. I finally decided this is not working for me. And so I talked to a friend who is a Christian counselor, and this has stuck with me ever since. Now, if you know me, you know that my life is guided biblically. It's hard for me to say that word. And so she gave me this advice based on, I'm going to read these two verses. Galatians chapter 6, I'll put this in the show notes, verses 2 and 5. Verse 2 says, bear one another's burdens. And verse 5, I hope I have this right, and it will be in the show notes. Verse 5 says, each one shall bear his own load. So I'm asking my friend, I'm like, well, how is this supposed to help me? Do I need to bear somebody else's or just my own? And so we talked about it for a bit. And I had this analogy that I felt was really, really good. So if you get on an elevator, and oftentimes if you look at those like inspections, it will say maximum 10 people or 1,500 pounds or something like that. That is the elevator's load. That is the maximum amount of weight that elevator was designed to carry. It's built that way. It's what it's made for. So I think about loads in our lives. Think about the loads in your life, and there will be a sheet for you in the show notes to work through that. Loads are typically things we choose. We pick them up along our path, along our life. They are things that we are designed to bear, that we are able to carry. And so your daily loads might be something like getting married, having children, buying a house, having a dog, having a job. Do you see where I'm going with this? So if we have a spouse, if we have children, I hate to say the word should, but you should probably, nurture those relationships. If you have a job, you should probably, show up, do the best job that you can. There are the things that are just life type things. Burdens, I see as things we didn't choose. We typically didn't ask for. And they are usually things that are very difficult to bear alone. And oftentimes we can't bear them alone. Your spouse leaves you. Your significant other leaves you. You've heard me talk about my house burned down in the middle of the night. We didn't go through that alone. My mental illness. Maybe you have an illness in your family. I have 3 friends now, or 3 people in my life who have relationships where they are battling cancer. And I try very hard to help bear that burden with them together. And so here's how this works. Whose load are you responsible for? Yours. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't help people, but whose load are you not responsible for? You're not responsible for other people's loads. And it doesn't mean that we don't help, but so often people will, and I hate to say people do or people, but oftentimes someone will unknowingly or knowingly put their load on you or ask you to take their load. Will you babysit my kids? Will you give me some money? Will you stay late for work? It doesn't mean, again, that we never do those things, but those are all things that people are responsible for. And so often we're basically, sure, give me your load. I'll take your load with my own load. So I'll take yours and I'll keep mine too. And this is what I was doing with my mother. I mean, honestly, okay, what is happening with my video? Apologies. All right, we're back on. With my mother, now I said my mother's health wasn't good, but my mother, I've shared her story many times. I'll put a link in the show notes, debilitating mental health issues, which affected me and contributed to my mental health issues. But she would go in the hospital and say things like if my sister and I were there, it's just the 2 of us. Oh, when we get in the hospital, it's the only time I get to see my girls together. Do you hear the word? Guilt, guilt, guilt. So you would think being in the hospital would be a burden, but honestly, for her, it really wasn't. So if she was in the hospital for something minor, of course I need to check on her, make sure that she was okay. But I was taking on all of her load and I was dropping all of my load. I would say goodbye to my husband and my children who I didn't get to see that often, and I would sit in the hospital room with her all day for someone that didn't necessarily need me. Does that make sense? Because I would feel guilty about doing that and then dropping these other things. And so what this allowed me to do is to say, okay, in the Bible, it says I'm responsible for helping other people with their burdens. And so I'm certainly going to try that. And if my mom really needs me, I'm going to be there for her. But if everything is okay, I'm going to check on her. I'm going to be there for a time. And then I'm going to give her load back to her and go just pick up mine and spend that time with my family. Listing those things on that sheet, I think, is going to help you a lot. So let me end with Michael. So remember, we opened with, I got the phone call. Michael cheated on a test. Now, Michael wasn't that kind of kid. Michael never got in trouble. You know, he's 32 now, and he's my child who battles anxiety. He's in a really good place right now, as far as I know. Thank you, God. But he battles that. And so to cheat, like, that was just way on the outskirts of what he would do. And so in my mind, it was like, oh my gosh, it's because I'm gone. It's because I'm not a good parent. So I had to look at those core values, right? Now, core values was family time. Core values was building my career so that I could build something, build a legacy for my family, increase my income so that I could then spend more time with my family. It's way too much to go into, but I had to say to myself, I was a good parent. We instilled good values in our children. I was not responsible for Michael's cheating. Was I angry? Yes. Was I concerned? Yes. But I was not guilty. And so what it meant, oh, by the way, sometimes when I would do this scenario in workshops live, there would be some people who would say, well, yeah, you were gone. You're guilty. But all of us are gone from our children from time to time. And I honestly was able to let go of that guilt. However, I did need to look at, well, are there things that I can do better, you know, to be more involved with him at school, even when I'm gone? So there you go. Guilt, the type that's cut and dry, the type that is not so cut and dry, it's based on our core values, and the type about picking up other people's loads when we really don't need to. I may have even more things for you in the show notes. We are flying out in the morning at 7:45. I have a 4-hour flight, so that's great work time. I'm going to see what other little nuggets I can put in there for you. But I hope that this has at least started the process of releasing you from guilt. Thank you for being here. Thank you for continuing to download, comment, subscribe, share with people. Please join our private Facebook group, A Place for Women, in the show notes. Follow me on my professional page, Facebook page. That's where I do most of my things. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because this is always on YouTube, plus just some other occasional things. All right. Well, I am now going to go get ready for my webinar and pack and get all things together. And until we're together next time, consider yourself hugged.